previously it was Dr. Davis doing a day a week of family medicine in Calabogie, Dr. Buxton doing 2 days a week, and rural general practice, they had hospitalists and emergency medicine interests as well, as do I. And it's been noted a lot by the public that we don't have full-time physicians in Calabogie. And we definitely get that that's an issue, but the setup of rural family medicine makes it difficult to do that, right? All of our doctors do other things, but we do see that we can increase our throughput in the clinic, both from a physician, an administrative, and a nursing standpoint, and allied health. Our current issues, well, even with the change of the other physicians coming in recently, we've had an increased amount of paperwork and throughput. We've hired a nurse that's there usually 2 or 3 days a week, and the flow of the clinic is not really conducive with that. We've moved recently. We had 3 full exam rooms, and we've moved to 5 full exam rooms, 3 with running water and all the necessary equipment, 2 without running water, one of which was actually our only office for physicians. So now we have 3 physicians that share our lunchroom as an office, and a lunchroom that isn't big enough for all of our staff to sit down at one time. So that's obviously a limitation, but our main concern, one of our main concerns, is confidentiality and privacy. Our walls and the venting, which we've looked at with maintenance, is well, you can hear everything through the whole clinic. So we do our best to talk quietly, play music, so people in the waiting room and the other exam rooms can't hear the confidential matters of our interactions, but it's still quite limiting, and I do fear for breaches in confidentiality. Accessibility is a concern of ours. We have 2 of our 5 rooms that can currently fit a wheelchair. Our bathroom can't fit a wheelchair. Our maintenance staff through the township does a great job making sure that we have accessibility. We're on a single floor, so our driveway is always well taken care of, and our walkway is, but it doesn't make it any easier when people come in a wheelchair and can't go to the bathroom. One of the other issues for confidentiality is, as the pandemic has gone through, a lot of our appointments have gone to video and telephone, and there's a push away from that again, but there's still about a 20% appointment rate that is over the phone, and when we have 2 or 3 physicians working out of the same office, that's a breach of confidentiality as well, and it's quite hard to function in that sense. A few other things that don't require as much explanation. We have a shared washroom with patients. We have a fair amount of electrical issues. We can't plug our coffee maker and our microwave in at the same time. We blow a fuse. It happens about twice a week, and using the electrical in a lot of the rooms it doesn't always function. Reception is definitely a challenge. We have 2 really good medical administrative staff, but the setup, we can only have 1 patient fronting at a time, and when they're doing phone calls and stuff like that, it can definitely be heard in the waiting room. Talking about the waiting room again, there's issues, both accessible but also COVID viral friendly. There's a lot of mandates put out by the government for spacing, obviously, and we could only hold 2 people sitting in our waiting room to meet those requirements, and it's still a concern at this point. think those are most of our concerns with the current building. Obviously, complaining doesn't really get us anywhere. So what do we see as a bright side, and how do we see this moving forward? We're really open and hoping to improve what we can offer in terms of healthcare in Calabogie. We know that there's an increasing population, and even without an increasing population, there's more demand than we are currently able to meet. We would like to see more physicians and more services available in the community, as the public would. And one of the ways that we are planning to do this, myself, some of the other physicians from Renfrew are looking to take on more teaching opportunities. I'm currently a lecturer with the University of Ottawa. I teach medical students through ERMEP, which is the Eastern Regional Rural Medicine Program for medical students. But our building isn't conducive to that either, because we're full as it is, so to get learners in. But that's one of our best ways to recruit. That's one of the reasons I'm here, is I got to work with Dr. Buxton as a medical student, as a resident. I got to experience Calabogie. So we are really trying to make a push on our availability for teaching. So we need more room for that. We need more room to be able to provide the care that the community needs. And there's a lot of good options that we can actually provide if we had more room. Foot care, CCAC, home care, vaccines, nursing clinics, and further recruitment, right? So there's a push from you guys for more physicians, and we want to provide the opportunity to allow people to come in. So we've already made the change from a family health group to a family health organization as September of last year. That includes the Renfrew group, and that really does help our recruitment base. But when we don't have room for people to come in, we're kind of limited. So our ask is really to work with council and figure out how we can do this. And I know we've talked a few times about the options, but I'm just putting towards council to keep it on the forefront.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, I do. So right now, the clinic is renting from the township. Is the idea that the township would continue to provide facilities, or I just want to know?
So I think what we're looking at is what options are available, is recognizing that the current situation the medical center is in doesn't allow for any growth. So what if anything can the township consider to assist with the challenges that the medical clinic is facing? So it could be, expanding, looking at a different location for it, looking at any number of things, but this is just the purpose of having Dr. Blaine here is just to communicate what challenges and opportunities are currently existing.
Yeah, I think this is to start the conversation.
Okay, so this is the first time?
This is the first time that Dr. Blaine has come to council chambers. He's had discussions with staff, and it was thought that it would be best to come forward to council, so council is aware of the issues and challenges that the medical center is facing, and I'm sure that you've heard comments or concerns within the community, and it's important to hear it directly from the source. And then once, we can look at, moving forward with other, where do we go from here? So is it conducting a study to see what is the actual need? What are our options available? So it's not that there's going to be a quick Band-Aid solution that we're going to have this problem solved in 6 months. As much as Dr. Blaine would like it, but, is there something that we can look at developing a longer term plan?
Yeah. Thank you. And I like the way you slipped Band-Aid in there. Just before that, Councillor Tripp, I believe you had your hand up via Zoom.
Thank you. It's more of a support statement to what Dr. Blaine has said in terms of, and the timeliness, because I think we've all heard this message on the campaign, and some of us have had the opportunity to have bilateral discussions about it. But this is not just tied specifically to Calabogie. We're very closely associated and tied to RVH and Renfrew, and the work that Dr. Blaine and his team does in Calabogie, and then his engagement, as with the other docs, as either hospitalists or working at the hospital in the ER, builds that bridge. But it's ultimately about community health care in the communities where people live. And if we can provide that access to them where they are, rather than having to transition to an ER or health becomes an issue that requires ER, if we can address that at our level, I think there's a longer term benefit to our community. I also want to echo what I've heard through the halls of RVH in terms of residents who are coming up to this area, love the area. They are intrigued with rural medicine and the unique ability to be a primary care practitioner, but also have opportunity for hospitalists, which is basically a fancy word for a doc who's in the hospital for a week at a time, and continuity of care to patients, and also ER. So it broadens their experience. My time goes back to when Dr. Buxton first started at the clinic. I was a kid, but I remember one doc and how easy it was when it served our needs back in the day. And we're clearly, obviously, bursting at the seams. So it's encouraging to have him here today to hear his message. It aligns with that we're hearing in other sectors of the community, and certainly from the residents. So I think it certainly behooves us to open up the door for communication and try to see if we can find innovative approaches for growth that would support him and then ultimately support us as a community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tripp. Dr. Blaine?
And I think this speaks a little bit to what your question was, Lois, too, is we have explored, and we're very aware that there's, depending on locale, there's very many different setups of independent practice, and a lot of these are independently funded, right? There's a lot of physicians, especially Ottawa, GTA, that are private practice buildings, and even in Perth, there's been a recent build by a physician himself, and that's it's definitely an option. It's not a financial option myself, but then we have the family health groups, family health organizations, family health teams, and community health centers. I've looked specifically at the consideration of community health centers such as Whitewater, Bromley, Lanark, and what the availability is, and for family health teams as well. And they are government-funded programs that allow, and I believe it's Ontario Health that ends up paying for the administrative, the nursing, the nurse practitioners, and all of that kind of stuff. Which allows us to provide amazing care, but they're expensive. Like the setup is very, very expensive for the government, but they're not allowing any more of those at this point. Calabogie Medical Center did actually apply with the help of a councilman at that time. I forget how many years ago it was, to be a family health team when they were last taking them on, and we were denied at that point. They gave the one to Whitewater, Bromley. So I reviewed what they gave at that point in their application. I've tried to figure out if we can even risk reapplying for family health teams, but they're not accepting any applications. So our setup currently as a family health organization is about as high as we can get now, from funding from higher up. But we would really like to be prepared, as well as there is more push now, and I think there's going to be only more in the next year or two to improve family health care and primary health care. And if we can be ready to strike and have a plan, and at that time be the first guy up to bat, then I think we have a good chance of getting more funding for our community.
Thank you. Any further or supplementary questions at this time? No. Well, I thank you for your time and bringing us to our attention. We knew about it, but it's great to see you face to face. Thank you.
So Dr. Blaine and I will continue to work on this and bring any progression on this project or potential project to council.
Thank you.
Just one quick question, if I may. Would we see a committee being struck to help support that?
Possibly. I think we will. I think we're just a little premature at this time.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Next we have for our delegations, the Backcountry Ski Club, and we have Leslie Cassidy and Peter.
Thank you. There's a green light on there, and then you'll have the mic. If you could just introduce yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
Perfect. Just get myself organized here. Okay, my name's Leslie Cassidy, and Peter Schutt is also in attendance with us today by Zoom, and he is the owner of Dacre Heights Ski Hill, the old Candiac skiways. So we're here today representing a group of cross-country ski enthusiasts who generally enjoy the backcountry and plowing through the snow. And as well, we represent a number of volunteers, because all of us do cross-country ski, that work on the Madawaska Nordic ski trails that are out just across the street from the ski hill. And we go in each fall and we do some cleanup and chainsawing and get them all ready for cross-country skiing. So it's a group of us that are here today. So first, I'd like to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to share this information with you and ask for permission, as well as your thoughts on the unopened road allowances. So the idea of a backcountry ski trail is not new. Actually, back in the 70s, there used to be a gentleman that's since deceased who would walk around at Candiac Ski Hill and at Dacre Heights and ask people if they would like to ski from the top of Candiac over to Calabogie. And a number of people have done it over the years. This happened in the 70s and 80s, and they would ski between 30 and 45 kilometers in a day, and they would start at the top of the ridge and work their way down along Kennelly Mountain Road, across farmers' fields and through some ATV trails and hunting trails, and then come in behind the old Club 45, and then work their way across Ferguson Lake Road and then back onto the Madawaska Nordic ski trails and come out at the end of the day, and with a bit of bushwhacking as well. And this was something that happened, and Peter, a number of years ago, came up with the idea of recreating the trail. And so he got a few of us on board, and we took a look at the maps, and the Ontario Crown Land Atlas indicated there was thousands of acres of Crown land. So Peter mapped out a trail that's mainly on Crown land. 98% or 99% is on Crown land, whereas the previous groups that would ski it was typically going across private land. So there was the opportunity to go around the few parcels of private land that we couldn't by use of an unopened road allowance, of which there's 3 that we are interested in going across. 2 are near Kennelly Mountain Road, and the other one's up near Murphy Lake, which is just before Peter's property at Dacre Heights. So we came to council back in, I guess it was November 18th, 2021, and we shared with council kind of our plan, and also that there were a number of no trespassing signs that were located along the unopened road allowances on Kennelly Mountain Road. And then at that point, we had support, and we started to work with the staff to kind of work out parking and discuss as well the sign and road allowances and the trail a bit. And staff was quite helpful, and we ended up I guess we have 20 kilometers now that are cleared and blazed. And we did, out of respect for the landowner near Kennelly Mountain Road. So we do have several landowners near Kennelly Mountain Road, one in particular who's not happy about the trail that is the unopened road allowance because the trail goes through just there for about 1 kilometer, I think, and that weren't particularly pleased. So we did last year, until we had worked together with the staff, shut that access, just out of respect. And then this fall, we did manage to get together. And I mean, some of this got delayed because of the pandemic and not wanting to get together. So we did get together in October, I believe, and there was the OPP and CAO, there was staff and Ward 1 councillor and the landowner's brother and his son. It was quite a collection of people out on the road, but we had, at least it was good because we got to chat about how everything would work and what an unopened road allowance was, and Eric came and explained that, what the definition is and kind of how it works. So our understanding was at that point that our trail wasn't on their property and it was on the unopened road allowance. We did reach out to the landowners after, because we did have a few discussions after everybody had left, just to kind of keep things on a positive note. And we did agree to a few things, and we reached out to them after and we haven't heard back. So this winter, we would like to move forward with opening up that next section if we can. I drove by today and the trail has been skied since the fresh snow has fallen. We have almost 20 kilometers open between the Madawaska Nordic Ski Trail as well as Centennial Lake, or the Centennial Lake Road. And just to mention as well that Peter has also spoken with the MNRF, and we have met whatever requirements they have in terms of a winter trail. So I guess that brings us to the last point, which is the whole idea of requesting your permission to access the unopened road allowances, of which there are 3, so that we can continue this ski trail that will in length be about between 40 and 45 kilometers long. It's not groomed. There's no hardenings of the surface. It won't be used in the summer either, because unopened road allowances travel across ponds, marshes. They go in a straight line. So when they're 66 feet wide, so we have very little room for moving around. But given that most of the trail, or 98% of it, is on Crown land, these are just small sections that we would have to access in order to avoid private property. So it would be to ask you for permission, as well as to ask that council speaks to the landowners along Kennelly Mountain Road and has them remove the signs. Today on my way in, I drove by and all the signs are still there, saying no trespassing and various other messages about trespassing. So that's all I have to say for today. Thank you.
Thank you for coming and your time today. Do we have any questions?
Question for you, Eric. Maybe you could indulge us with your definition of the unopened road allowance for this council.
Sure, thank you, through you, Mayor Weir. So we'll give you there's a definition per se, but they function, it's land owned by the township. Their intent is for public access, but they are specifically unimproved. They're not maintained by the township in any way. It's pretty common for people to use them for like passive recreational purposes. In rural municipalities, there's potentially some, minor improvements to them in the way of like, just well-trodden, desire lines, if you will, like trails down them. But, just generally they're lands that were originally surveyed between the lots and concessions within the geographic townships, and they are owned by the municipalities that they're located within the jurisdiction of, and they are just unimproved, and in many cases will never be improved because they lead nowhere. So,
just to follow up, does the township have any liabilities in the event anything occurs on the?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Weir. So we do have a staff report on the agenda in relation to that. So this again has been going on for some time. Previous staff did follow up with the insurer, indicated it's a relatively benign use. It's not anticipated to result in any liability to the township. Thank you.
Any further comments, questions, concerns? Councillor Popke?
You mentioned that it's solely for the purpose of the cross-country skiing in the wintertime. But what's to stop the use of people in the summertime using it, like with ATVs or motorized vehicles and whatnot, through that same route? Because from my experience, you cut open a trail, people will follow it. And it's not just going to be solely the skiers that are using it.
Yeah, this is something where Peter and I are wrestling with a bit. We are trying to keep it narrow to avoid that situation. And we're only removing trees that are dangerous, overhanging, or will impede skiing. We're not, when a tree falls in the bush and a skier can go over it because there's lots of snow, then we're not going to take that away. So we're doing our best to keep it in a natural state, and narrow, so that skidooers and ATVers can't come through it. And we are making an effort not to mark it in a really obvious way. We blaze trees, but we keep that the distance is enough that it would take some work to kind of find the next way through. So we're trying to take some of these methods, I guess you could call it, or tools into account, because we understand that up here. It's, everybody loves their trails up here. And in some places we are using ATV trails or dirt bike trails that are already in existence that aren't used in the winter. So that's what we're trying to do as well. But that is something that we are considering and having to take into account. But we definitely are trying to keep the trails narrow so that we avoid that happening.
I have a question for Eric, the planner. Is there anything that keeps anyone from ever walking on or skiing on or using an unopened road allowance?
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, no, there isn't. The township, we do not have a policy to that effect. Some townships do, in order to deal with kind of more intensive uses of road allowances, where people are, significantly improving them to regulate things like that. But generally speaking, no, there's nothing that we have in terms of bylaws or policies or anything that prevent people from using them, walking, hiking, those kinds of things.
And during our visit this fall, we did note when standing on the road, they had to point out. So they do try to mask the entrance during the off season, so that it's not apparent that there's a ski trail. It's not like an ATV trail at all.
And just follow up, and I think that the title of it, Backcountry, says a lot, that these are not groomed trails. I don't anticipate any trails making pass for cross-country skiing, because the backcountry skis, they're a lot wider, they're not racing, so they don't have to use as much room for skating, pushing, so they don't have to widen out the trails all that much. And so I think the trail itself would, judging by the name of backcountry, that would be fairly narrow and rustic anyways. Is that correct?
That is, yes.
Thank you. Do we have any other? Councillor Thompson.
One other, this is, I think council definitely gives our support. I don't see why we wouldn't. But what authority do we have to tell is that a police matter, or who's going to tell the owner to get rid of the no trespassing sign?
We will send notification.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns? No? Okay, well, I thank you for your time, and thank you for coming and bringing this to our attention. And I know that Allison will be following up and getting back with you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And our last and not least delegation of the afternoon is the library board budget presentation by the library CEO, Ruth Jones.
Hello. Thanks for having us here to present our budget today. Mayor Weir.
Is your mic on?
It's on.
Perfect, thank you.
I found the button. I'm just trying to load my presentation here. There we go. So thanks again for having us here. I'm Library CEO Ruth Jones I'm CEO from 2021. I'm happy to be here today and excited to show you what we have coming up in 2023.
Ruth, can you pull the microphone closer to you now? So we can hear you?
Yes, I can do that. So we've been happy in 2022 to be working in our beautiful township with some extraordinary people to create a community resource. We have some lovely volunteers working alongside us to grow the library, our library resources and services. You can see here in our first slide that we've been trying to showcase township resources. We have an impressive number of venues available to us at the library, and we've been trying to get people out and enjoying those places across the township. Some of the highlights of 2022, or library developments rather, we saw some changes in our technology. We were fortunate to be able to upgrade our computers and Chromebooks. We received 3 of those this year to make available to township residents. Print services as well. We acquired a new printer and 1 additional printer through a grant opportunity, which is excellent for us. We use it a lot. Our outreach and community services as well, we've been growing over the course of the year. Grants and non-monetary donations as well, we've been pursuing. We were fortunate to get some shelving, for instance, from Arnprior Public Library, and a small grant to establish a book collection for readers struggling with dyslexia. We're thankful to our donor sponsors and partners and volunteers for their support of the library, and a lot of our work is looking to engage future volunteers and find future opportunities to bring resources into the community. This is a 4-year review of library usage. We went back to 2019 before our closure in 2020. You can see there's continued interest in library memberships increasing. We've seen uptake in our digital checkouts, which has been exciting for us because that digital resources continue to be the easiest way for remote users to access library resources. We've seen continuous use as well of hard copy, which is exciting for me. I like to be able to see books going out the door. The kids in particular have been using the library heavily. We've been pursuing every opportunity to bring new programs into the community, and we've seen good uptake. We've been continuing with our library deliveries to the Griffith Depot, which currently is Pine Valley, and we're very thankful to them for offering their space to us, and to our volunteer driver as well. You'll see in our operations budget that we've addressed mileage. We've budgeted for that this year in 2023, and then e-resources as well in programming. So this is our staffing review. You'll note that in 2023 we're looking to increase our staffing, and that's to address a growing need for more programming, and it's in response to former council's request as well for more customer-facing time and better service delivery. Our growth focus is to continue to diversify services and programs. We have a largest program that we're looking to deliver in 2023 in cooperation with Watersheds Canada. This will be funded through a grant, and we're working together with them on a grant application that's been supported by council. The program will be delivered across the township, and it's really a public education opportunity to introduce basic concepts of environmental stewardship. The Watersheds Canada focus is freshwater systems and shoreline ecosystems. So I'll outline the program on the next slide here. You'll see that what we get through this program is expert knowledge through Watersheds Canada. They're offering to deliver 3 seminars and an outdoor workshop. And in addition, we'll receive 30 discovery backpacks. The kids have been enjoying the backpacks we currently have. We just have 2 of them. But the growth of this program will allow us to share the Discovery Backpack with the school community and outlying communities and community groups as well. Our contribution is assistance in developing materials for the program that are specific to our township. So it's a customized program. We'll work in consultation with public groups, and our contribution as well is to offer in-session staff support. So that will be reflected in our staffing budget, which is like the next slide, I think. So it's a cross-generational program that will support concerns about development practices in the township, and hopefully it will be a community building opportunity as well. There's a financial impact. Though the program's free, we will have to devote staff time as per the grant application. And so you'll see on this slide, oh, did I skip the? Sorry, I'm just going to continue. So you'll see the increased wages benefits here. Wages will always be the largest part of our budget. The increase in 2023 is directly related to increases in programming and service delivery, and then this backpack initiative as well. We've seen progressions along the pay grid and a 3% COLA wage increase, which is consistent with other departments as well. There's a $10,000 increase in our operations costs related again to programming, some in-house developments in the library. We'd like to see a sitting area where people can come together, staff training, and then increased costs in other areas like postage, mileage, and advertising. Our facility costs, there's a negligible increase there. We've really seen no increase at all. So every year we contribute an amount towards the operations of the library. Part of this amount comes directly from the province of Ontario and helps to cover our wages. A communications grant as well we receive through the government. We will be pursuing corporate grant opportunities, donations, and fundraising opportunities as well. And we'll look to apply lot development fees towards future library developments also. So this year for 2023, again related to our increased programming and staffing largely, our budget request from the township is 147 approximately. And again, we'll look to support that number or the cost of the operation of the library with fundraising and corporate grant efforts or opportunities. And that's the bulk of my presentation there. But if you have any questions, I can address those now if you like.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from council?
Lois?
We will have no winking, please. Any other questions or any comments at this time? No? Ruth, thank you very much for your presentation. And very, very well delivered, by the way. Thank you. Okay. So thank you for your time today. And if we don't have any further questions, thank you. And I would ask at this time that if our delegation of presenters wish to stay, they're more than welcome. But if you wish to leave, that's I know you're busy as well. So thank you.
Just for next steps in regards to the library budget. So currently, the budget that was presented to council does not include the increase. If you have any questions regarding this, either pointed to Ruth or to how it ties into our budget, you could bring it forward to me and then I guess I'll be seeking direction on January 31st when we have the council meeting or special council meeting on how I should be considering this request into the budget process.
Okay. Thank you, Renee.
.01.1 is a correspondence received from Mr. Tim Yerington regarding parking at the Eagles Nest parking lot. The letter is included in the package. We did receive this later, and if council does wish, our facilities manager can provide a response with a recommendation at the February council meeting.
All in favor of, do we have a mover of that one? Move. I don't know whether everybody's had time to fully go through the 5-page document that was sent to us. I myself have gone through it, but I'd also like to review it further before making a conscientious decision on it. So I would move that we make a motion that we move to accept Allison's to be put over till February.
I recommend, so what will happen is that there is some background on this property that will be provided to council along with consideration of comments and information provided in the letter, and the facilities manager will make a recommendation for council to consider.
We have a mover? Oh, question?
There's a question. If we consider his request, we should also consider other people who might, like people who grooms the trail, who goes to maintain it.
That's exactly what we're going to be.
Okay, that's what we'll cover. Okay,
bringing forward any precedents and future considerations that we may have to consider.
Mayor Weir, would it be possible? Thank you, Mayor Weir. Would it be possible between now and February, as this kind of comes through for a recommended decision, that, and maybe this has already happened, just a letter of acknowledgement back to him that we've received it and thanking him for his efforts in bringing it forward, and that it will be coming forward for further discussion, just so that it's not a long time period before he hears that we've agreed it. Thank you.
Just so council is aware, that is part of our process behind the scenes, that we do send a letter letting the author know what our next steps are, so, because we agree that it is a long time. So there will be correspondence sent out in the next few days.
Great. Thank you.
Did we move on that?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Let's try that again. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Okay. All in favor of having this put over to the February? Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence.
So there are no reports or memos in the Public Works Department. There's no reports and memos in the Protection Service Department. And we'll move into the Planning Department, which starts with 8.01.1, the building permit report for November 30th, 2022 and December 31st, 2022.
I'm guessing I'm up.
Eric, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Weir. So there are two building permit reports on there. One from November 30th, which is just kind of an earlier version of the December 31st one. So I'll refer to the 31st. So December, we had a slower December than 2021. Probably more people spending more time at social events coming out of COVID and whatnot. General, recoil from COVID building and renovation projects and whatnot. So, but still overall a good year. And about $30 million in total value in 2021, pushing 32 million in 2022. So we'll see what 2023 brings.
Thank you. Any comments, questions?
I see the year over year, but in a general trend, has this been going up exponentially? Is this an exponential move, or is this a steady increase over the years?
So I'm not sure, to be honest with you, but my understanding, because of the OPG project, there's been a significant jump in the last recently in terms of permit values, and then because of COVID as well. I can't speak to kind of before 2021, but my guess is if it's kind of like the town of Renfrew or like essentially anywhere else in the province, there's been a really sustained level of building activity, and my guess would be that we had a pretty good jump starting in 2020.
If council would wish, we can bring forward a 5-year summary that summarizes the last row to show the growth in the various components and bring it forward as an information item in February.
Thank you.
Next, we have 8.01.2, letter from Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Minister Stephen Clark, regarding Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone Act, Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster, Bill 3, Strong Mayors Building Homes Act, Bill 39, Municipal Governance Act.
Thank you. And again, through you, Mayor Weir. So this is just correspondence item. We get them from time to time from the province. If they have a date at the top, they're not really scary. If they don't have a date at the top, they don't really want you to know when they sent it. That's my theory anyway. Anyway, I digress. Bill 23. So it looks like they're just providing in effect dates for the various elements, and there's a schedule attached. Bill 109, they're highlighting primarily the deferral of the application fee refund requirement to the summer. So that's good news, more breathing room. OPA 35 with the county official plan amendment is moving through. It was referred back for additional revisions because of Bill 23. So that'll hopefully come forward and be done and dusted by the summer. And Bill 3, it's a piece of legislation I haven't paid as much attention to because we've had enough going on with Bill 23 and Bill 109, but Bill 3 is, and also because it pertains primarily at this time to the City of Toronto and the City of Ottawa, it does provide additional powers to mayors of those municipalities to advance bylaws and decisions with a smaller contingent of council in terms of the number of votes required, and provide just additional powers on the administrative side as well. So, but again, those are only related this time to the City of Toronto and the City of Ottawa. I think that's it for that piece.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Eric. So in terms of impact on the township, where do you see the biggest impact or impacts in the coming year or years?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Weir. So I think, Bill 109 is going to have some impact, particularly for applications where we do exceed our statutory timelines. We'll be compelled to refund on a sliding scale some or all of those fees. I think Bill 23, like without question, is one of the most significant pieces of legislation that a provincial government has produced in regards to the Planning Act, and probably like in a generation. And it definitely changes, you know, how we process development. It removes the appeal rights for minor variances and consent applications. It removes public meeting requirements for subdivision applications. In urban areas, most significantly, it permits up to 3 residential units. That's not something we're going to worry about in Greater Madawaska. Makes a number of revisions to the Ontario Heritage Act to essentially require that, you know, you designate properties or they get taken off the Heritage Register. There's essentially just a significant push for housing as a result of Bill 23, and it impacts different parts of the province differently, but without a doubt, you know, you're looking at that being, you know, the most significant piece. You know, Conservation Authorities Act, we only have a portion of the township affected by Conservation Authority, but the scope of their review has been reduced significantly. You know, so it's really, you'd call it a, you know, I guess you'd refer to it as generational. It's very significant.
Thank you. Anything further? Eric, just one quick question. Within these acts, is it included with the Ontario Land Tribunal being able to levy fines against recipients or applicants and the people who make the decisions?
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mayor Weir, thank you for bringing that up. That's a great point. One of the changes in Bill 23 that's of great significance is it used to be that in order to have costs awarded against you at the Ontario Land Tribunal, and those costs can be significant, hearings can drag on in some cases for years, involve numerous expert witnesses, consultants being retained by all parties involved, of course, legal representation. I've been involved in, you know, in appeals where costs, you know, on a per party basis have exceeded, you know, $1 million, and it gets to be quite expensive in some cases. And it used to be, in order to have costs awarded against you, you had to essentially be acting in bad faith. So it had to have been demonstrated that you were, you were impeding the process, the board's proceedings, through the appeal process. You had to be, presenting undue delay in some form or other, whether it's the submission or review of documents. Essentially, it had to be demonstrated that you were acting egregiously in the course of either making the decision or through the appeal proceedings. Bill 23 has raised the stakes in that regard, in the sense that the tribunal is now able to award costs on the basis of just who wins. So they make decisions based on policy, the applicable policy, whether there is consistency and conformity with the applicable policy and compliance with the Planning Act. And they rely on expert witness testimony to demonstrate that, and they kind of stop there. And, they'll hear other arguments, from, concerned residents and that kind of thing, but unless it is substantiated on a policy basis or with the support of qualified expert witnesses, they don't give as much weight or any weight in many cases to those submissions. So all that to say that it's very important. It will be increasingly important for municipalities, as it has been, in the past, but now there's money associated with it, that if decisions are not made on the basis of applicable policy, in consistency and conformity with policy and applicable legislation, that there is the potential for significant financial consequences for the municipality in likely losing an appeal if decisions aren't made on that basis. So thank you very much for raising that. That's actually an incredibly significant implication from Bill 23. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further questions, comments, concerns? No, not at this time. None seen. Thank you.
8.01.3, letter from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Minister Stephen Clark, regarding More Homes Built Faster, Act 2022.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Weir. This one's a little lighter here. So our understanding, and it sounds like there's more to come, but essentially municipalities are going to be able to have building interns, basically kind of, if you bring staff in that aren't qualified, they're kind of able to train on the job and become qualified on the job and work under a chief building official. And this is essentially just to address the lack of qualified staff province-wide. There's been a lot of retirements. It's been very hard to fill positions. So this looks like to try to address that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, concerns? None seen? Thank you.
The next item is 8.01.4, Bylaw 04/2023, zoning bylaw amendment 2206.10, Popkey.
I'm just gonna step out here. You guys figure this out.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll come get you.
Yeah, could you just shut the door too at the same time? Thank you.
That council approves bylaw 04/2023, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 22-2003 as amended to rezone part of the lands located in part of lot 30 and 31, concession 3, geographic township of Brome, from rural RU to rural exception 49 RUE 49 to permit accessory structures on a lot prior to the main permitted use.
Thank you. Eric,
Yes,
comments, please?
Thank you, Mayor Weir. Is it Brome or Brewham? Help me out
Brome.
here.
We'll go with
Brome.
We'll go with Brome.
All right.
That's how we pronounced it when it
New
was
guy.
a car too.
So the subject lands here, no municipality, has 2828 Centennial Lake Road, located in part lot 30 and 31, concession 3, geographic township of Brome. The property is currently zoned rural under zoning bylaw 22-2003. The lands are about 157 acres in area, got about 470 meters of frontage on Centennial Lake Road. The property as it exists currently contains an existing dwelling, woodshed, 2 storage sheds, and a workshop. They filed an application for land severance, B5422, for the creation of 1 residential lot, which will contain the dwelling, in addition to 1 larger retained lot, which will contain some of the existing accessory buildings. And in order to finalize this severance, the purpose of the amendment is to fulfill one of the conditions of consent for 54/2022 in order to permit accessory structures on the retained lands before the main permitted use, and that's prohibited by the zoning bylaw. So we have this application before council today. And the effect will be that there will be a new exception zone, an RU exception 49 zone, to permit those accessory structures. Staff, we have no concerns with this application. We submit that it is consistent with, conforms to applicable policy, and we are recommended that it be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, concerns, comments? Councilor Tripp, you good? Okay, good. Do we have a mover?
Councilor Tripp.
Mover. Seconder? All of the above. All in favor? Thank you. All in favor. Motion.
Can we ask,
Oh, okay. I don't know what she was doing on the computer.
we're just waiting for Councillor Popkey to return to his chair.
Thank you. Councillor Popkey has returned to chambers.
8.01.5, bylaw 05-2023, zoning bylaw amendment 2206.11 higher. The council approved bylaw 05-2023 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 22-2003 as amended to rezone part of the lands located in part of lot 17 concession 3 geographic township of Bagot from rural to rural exception 50 to restrict future development in a minimum distance of 300 meters from Madawaska River until the setback lands are cleared of archaeological potential.
Thank you. Eric, would you like to speak to this for us, please?
Thank you. Yes, Mary, we would be glad to. So this is also a condition of consent, this application. It's for application B30-2022. It's for property known municipally as 1222 Lower Spruce Hedge Road. It's located in part lot 17, concession 3, geographic township of Bagot. I got that one right, did I? Perfect. The property is currently zoned as rural under zoning bylaw 2003. The overall holdings, 79 acres with an average lot depth of 358 meters. And in this case, the severance is for the purpose of the creation of one residential lot again. In this case, because of the size of the retained lands and the proximity to the Madawaska River, provincial policy and county official plan policy requires that development within 300 meters of the river be restricted until the lands are cleared of archaeological potential. So this zoning bylaw amendment will place that restriction on the lands through the creation of a new exception zone, RUE 50, which will include the noted provisions prohibiting the issuance of a building permit within 300 meters of the river unless supported by an archaeological assessment. And I should have noted with the previous application, we'd have a public meeting last Thursday, January the 12th. We had no comments with the previous application. With this one here, we did have a question in regards to an intervening piece of land, but no objections to this application were received. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns? Motion to move? Secondary, Councilor Tripp. All in favor? Favor? It's catching. Motion passed.
Item 8.01.6, bylaw 06-2023, zoning bylaw amendment 2206.12, Balcombe. The council approved bylaw 06-2023, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 22-2003 as amended to rezone the subject lands located in part of lot 14, concession 3, being lot 22, plan 49M-86, geographic township of Blythefield, from rural residential to rural residential exception 19 to increase an increase in size and height of a proposed secondary dwelling unit.
Planner Eric, please.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mayor Weir. So this application is with respect to lands known municipally as 776 Barrett Chute Road, located in part lot 14, concession 3, geographic township of Blythefield. The property is currently zoned rural residential under zoning bylaw 22-2003. The subject lands are 2.44 acres, almost 2.5 acres in area, with approximately 130 meters of frontage on the west side of Barrett Chute Road and are regularly shaped. The lands are currently vacant and they're located in the Barrett Chute subdivision. The lands, they have a negative slope from southwest to northeast toward Calabogie Lake. Surrounding land uses are rural residential in nature with existing dwellings located up gradient of the site further up the road. The rural residential zone that I noted, it permits a range of residential land uses. They're supportable, that are supportable on private water and sewage services. In the zoning bylaw for lands that have a residential zone, a secondary dwelling unit is permitted as of right on the property without a need for a zoning bylaw amendment if they are over 8,000 square meters or just around 2 acres. And this site, this property is over over that limit. The application that is being proposed is not for permitting a secondary dwelling unit. It is, as noted, being filed in order to request permission to build the smaller of the two dwellings first. Normally, you would have, the way the zoning kind of contemplates it is that you would have a larger existing dwelling, build a smaller one. There are some circumstances, as we have here, and as you would have if you had, say, a smaller bungalow on an existing lot and you wanted to build a larger house for yourself and have your, say, your parents move into the smaller dwelling, where it might, the reverse could be appropriate. And they're also requesting an increase in height of the secondary dwelling to 8.28 meters. Now, note that the zoning bylaw does contemplate taller secondary dwelling units up to 7.5 meters for secondary dwellings above a garage. And again, in this case, you have that, what would be typically the secondary dwelling unit being built first. And and up to 10.5 meters is permitted in terms of the maximum for single detached dwellings. So the relief that's being requested, if you think about it, is actually already permitted on the property. If you were to build just a very large single detached dwelling, could be up to 10.5 meters in height. So we look at this in terms of the impact to whether the secondary dwelling unit is in fact, secondary, and it's, it exists on an accessory basis. I think in effect, you are achieving the same result as you would if you were to build the larger dwelling first and the second dwelling with the unit above the garage second. They are just, they're looking for some flexibility on this for cost reasons and just for their own needs. We did have a public meeting last week on Thursday, as we did with the other applications. And we have received a number of submissions just in regards to this application, some in support, some with noting some objections. We did receive a number of comments at the public meeting last week. And so what I've attempted to do is I've attempted to kind of outline some responses to those comments that were made, if it would please council, and just to provide some clarity in terms of staff's response or comments on those for council's consideration. So in terms of restrictive covenants, we heard quite a bit about restrictive covenants through written submissions and orally. That is addressed in the report, and essentially, and we have followed up with the township solicitor on it. Essentially, what our understanding is, and what we've been told, is that this exists as kind of a private instrument between the purchasers and the original developer of the Barrett Chute subdivision, and that while there may be some questions about enforceability and about the parties involved in those covenants, it's pretty conclusive the township is not party to those covenants, and so there's no impact in relationship to our ability to approve a zoning bylaw amendment or issue a building permit. The obligation is on the applicants, and they're being advised through this, and we'll continue to advise them that their obligations remain their obligations, in terms of whether there's anything registered on title, just in the same way that if you have an easement or if you have a right of way on your property, if we issue a building permit or approve a zoning bylaw amendment, that doesn't delete everything from the title of your lands. You still have those obligations. And I think just in terms of just a review of the restrictive covenants, I think those myself and the township solicitor and others who have had an opportunity to review them, we're not really seeing a contravention of those covenants in this regard. I think there might be some. There was a comment that perhaps the ground floor area of the garage, because the dwelling wasn't literally on the ground, because you had the garage taking up the whole, that there was an issue. Again, that may have to be tested, but just on the face of it, we're not really seeing a contravention. But in any case, the township is not party to those covenants. The subdivision agreement, of course, the township is a party to the subdivision agreement. The purposes of a subdivision agreement are to lay out the parameters for how an area is to be constructed, primarily in terms of the services that are provided, the standards that are in place, permits that are required to be provided to the municipality in the form of, ECA's financial requirements in terms of security deposits, how those are to be refunded, the submissions that are required in terms of engineering designs and engineering certificates upon construction inspections. Essentially, it relates to the development of the subdivision. There are some elements that continue on in perpetuity, but by and large, they exist to regulate the development of the subdivision before it's then turned over to the purchasers. There was some reference to, in the comments, to an issue with the subdivision agreement. Again, in our review in the subdivision agreement, we can find an issue in terms of the regulation of land use. Certainly that is not the function of subdivision agreements in terms of a perpetual regulation of land use. That's within the purview of the zoning bylaw. I think what we kind of think is that there's reference being made to the draft conditions, which are attached to the back of the subdivision agreement for more for convenience purposes. And condition 1 of the draft conditions describe the draft plan of subdivision that the conditions pertain to. And draft conditions, the function of draft conditions is kind of as, as they sound. They're to provide conditions that have to be met and cleared before the subdivision can be registered and the lots sold. So that's been done. The subdivision agreement has been registered, the lots have been sold, all those conditions have been cleared. So the function of those draft conditions is really null. They don't have a function anymore. And, in our opinion and in the opinion of the solicitor, they do not function to restrict land use in perpetuity. That would essentially mean that any subdivision agreement that attaches draft conditions would not be able to change land use in perpetuity, and that's just not that just doesn't work. So measurement of height in the zoning bylaw, we've addressed it in the staff report. I think, the message there is that there's a number of ways, number of different height limits that are applied depending on the circumstances. There was a comment that height shouldn't be allowed to change from the bylaw requirement. The Planning Act requires the township to consider applications for amendment to the zoning bylaw and minor variance, and it's on a case-by-case basis. Applications are always evaluated based on applicable policy. From a policy perspective, we cannot identify any policy concerns with the requested height increase in this application or in the requested floor area increase. Just of note, the minimum setbacks that apply to a single detached dwelling, they also apply to a secondary dwelling unit. So the impact of an increase in height is quite a bit different than with a typical accessory building that's permitted to have quite reduced setbacks. I think, just finally on that piece, that a request for increase in height and floor area of this nature, kind of on a smaller lot, we'd look at it quite a bit differently than we are in this case, over 2.5 acres in land area. There was a comment in relation to township liability related to issuance of a building permit that contravenes the developer's covenants. Again, the finding of our solicitors that those covenants are private covenants, and we're continue to advise the applicant that any approval issued by the town should not be construed as relieving them of any rights or obligations under any kind of private contracts or any legal instruments registered on title. And just that kind of as an extra measure, we'll look at things like maybe getting people to sign kind of an acknowledgement of that fact on building permit applications or planning applications. But I think this is just it applies no matter what. But maybe just a helpful thing just to make sure everyone is always aware of that fact. We had a comment related to the development not being marketed as an area for secondary dwellings. Again, we can't comment on or control how the developments are marketed. At the time, and maybe just of note, at the time the subdivision was developed, secondary dwelling units weren't a requirement in the Planning Act. I believe it was 2018 when the zoning came in place for secondary dwelling units. And the Planning Act was amended around that time to require municipalities to have policies in their official plans and in provisions in their zoning bylaws pertaining to secondary dwelling units. And I think the message there is just planning policy changes over time. Again, we can't control the marketing, but planning policy, it does change over time with amendments to the Planning Act, and this is just an example of that. Concerns about impacts to property values and investments, and just very simply, that is not a land use planning matter. We do not consider it at all in staff reports. You will never hear that mentioned in anything that we bring before council in terms of our submissions, and that's been held by the Ontario Land Tribunal. Concern about impacts to views, again, not a land use planning matter. It will not be something that you will see in our staff reports referenced. That's also been held by the Ontario Land Tribunal. It's a common law issue that's been developed. It's in fact, believe it or not, it's hundreds of years old. It kind of comes from the United Kingdom in a sense that the impacts to views are too subjective, and the different views are important to different people, and common law is essentially held that is just off the table entirely. There is no there's no right to a view, no protection of views, and you see this brought up on a relatively regular basis in larger cities where you have an entire condominium tower with people that can see the lake or see the city at one point, and then another tower goes up and they can't anymore. So it's just held that that is not a planning issue that is given any regard. There's obviously a difference between that and something like a view of a significant heritage building or a corridor. There are some of those in larger cities where you have a building that's hundreds of years old with a corridor that has existed for also that amount of time, and those views are protected, but again, they have to be designated and that kind of thing. This is not that situation. Concern about impacts to natural heritage features. There are no significant natural heritage features on the property or within 120 meters of the property, and that's the impact area for most significant features set in the official plan, so not an issue. Ability of services to accommodate the proposal, and I addressed that in report with respect to water and wastewater. Again, official plan policy sets, permits 2 dwellings as of right on lots over 2 acres. This is 2.5. Concern about setting a precedent. Again, every application on its merits. Secondary dwelling units, they're permitted as of right within the zoning bylaw over 2 acres. Again, just reinforcing, this application is not required to permit a secondary dwelling unit. That's got a lot of airtime. A building permit could be applied for today for 2 dwelling units on this property without need for any zoning relief. And maybe just a note, the rural residential zone also permits other lower density forms of development that are able to be accommodated on private services like duplexes, semi-detached dwellings, and group homes are also noted as permitted in the rural residential zone. And there is just no policy basis for a general restriction of development, on any lot of this size to 1 dwelling unit. Concern about a future severance. Secondary dwelling units are not permitted to be severed from the main dwelling, and they are permitted to be tied into the same septic system. Concern about resale. Township cannot control the sale of property following amendment to the bylaw. There's nothing that can be done about that. And concern about timing of construction. So there's nothing in zoning that can regulate the timing of construction. There was a suggestion that a holding symbol be used to prevent the issuance of a building permit until such time as conditions, there was a suggestion that a holding symbol be used to prevent or essentially to require that that construction only take a certain amount of time. That can't happen. Holding symbols cannot be used for that purpose. Holding symbols are used specifically to prevent the issuance of a building permit until such time as conditions are met. So like the submission of required studies, engineering designs, site plan approval, etc. So the idea is that similar to a draft plan of subdivision, conditions are cleared, the holding symbol is lifted, a building permit is issued. It's not intended to be used. It can't be used for the perpetual limitation of land use. That's effectively conditional zoning, and that's not permitted. We do have, though, timing requirements under building permits under the Building Code Act that we can use to ensure that we don't have situations with prolonged construction. So that would be the response and kind of the inventory of comments that I believe we received. If there's anything that I haven't covered, certainly I'd be glad to respond to it. But all that said, there is nothing in the comments that we received that changes staff's recommendation from a policy perspective. Again, our recommendation and the decision of council is required to be based strictly on consistency and conformity with applicable policy, and that is the test that's applied at the Ontario Land Tribunal. I would suggest that this is, this is our second public meeting. We're going to have many more over 4 terms, or sorry, over the term over 4 years. And, there are going to be submissions that are made that do draw our attention to legitimate policy concerns that we're not aware of. And it's very important that we address them. And it's also very important that everybody's heard. That's part of the process. When it comes to the decision of council, it's very important, though, that decisions are made on the basis of consistency and conformity to applicable policy, and that we really draw our attention to those factors. So with all that being said, staff's recommendation is still that this application be approved. And barring that, if there are any comments, I'd certainly be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Quite extensive research done on that. It probably took you a lot longer to research than it actually for you to talk. So it must have been a lot of work. I'm going to ask for questions and comments, but I just want to ask a clarifying question, if I may, first. My interpretation of this, Eric, of this, what is before us today is they want to build the smaller unit before the larger unit. So that is what we're discussing, is can that be done? And that's the part of the bylaw that we're addressing, is having the secondary unit built before the primary. And the other part of that is that the secondary unit's height is 8.5, I believe. However, if they built the first house first, they would be able to put a secondary unit on there of 10.5. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor Weir. So yeah, you're correct. The only relief that we're looking at here is we're not looking at whether a secondary dwelling unit is permitted. We're talking about the floor area of the second unit, and we're talking about the height of it because of the sequencing of it. Just one minor note, it would be 7.5 meters, so there may be some relief required to the dwelling that they're proposing with the main floor garage. But yes, the conversation is not whether a secondary dwelling unit is permitted. And again, in terms of height impacts, we're looking at, is there, is the secondary dwelling unit still secondary? Are there any legitimate adverse impacts aside from things like views, which we can't consider? We just can't see any in this case. So that would be correct. Thank you.
Okay, so we're talking on which one gets built first. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question here, Weir.
Sir Tripp?
Thank you, Mayor Weir. And thank you, Eric. This has been really informative and helpful. And perhaps not tied to the policy, but just a question of process. The septic system that would be designed for the temporary building, or sorry, for the secondary building, will it be sized or scoped in anticipation of the main building so that we know when the main building is built, it will still be kind of in line with what is needed for the 2 buildings?
Through you, Mayor Weir, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tripp. Councillor Thompson?
Would this proponent be able to build a smaller building before the larger building if they weren't asking for a height change?
Through you, Mayor Weir, they would still need the relief for the smaller, the building a larger building second. Again, that's in the zoning bylaw. And to be just truthful on it, in terms of my view on this, I'm not sure there's a good reason for requiring the second one to be smaller. I think, again, and I mentioned this, I think I've mentioned this previously, you got to start somewhere. And I think everyone kind of thought, the smaller one second. I think maybe it probably works a little bit better in urban areas where you have the main dwelling taking up most of the lot, so you probably don't want a real big second one anyway. But in other cases, and especially on a 2.5 acre lot, I'm not sure there's a great reason that we have that, so we may be looking at that in the future. They may not have even had to come in for an amendment, depending on, how we look at that. But yeah, in answer to your question, yeah, they would still have to come in for the floor area.
Supplementary?
So is there anything that will ensure that they do build that larger building? Or are we now allowing a small building, people to live above their garage?
Can I add a supplementary to, Sorry, Eric. They're building a building to live in. Yes, their intention is to build a second one, but the time might take time to build the second one once they have the finances and everything in place. But I think what we're getting caught in the mire here is if they did build the big one first, we wouldn't be even discussing this today. There would just be a building permit to build the secondary. So I think it's basically what's the order, and whether it turns out that they may find out that this secondary home is actually more than adequate for their living style and may never build a bigger one. But the size of it is, if you've looked at the drawings and stuff, it's a nice home. It's a nice size. So I think what we're discussing is the order in which the build is, not whether it's going to be built. But I'll pass that back to Eric. Maybe I'm misinterpreting, but that's.
Thank you, Mayor Weir. So I think my only comment there would be the the first dwelling is pretty large. It's like they've got it as 2,000 square feet for the primary dwelling, so it's quite large. You know, whether it's as big as some of the other houses in the area, I'm not sure. I'm sure they're definitely much larger dwellings, but you know, it's not. It's for sure like not a tiny home or anything like that. It's a sizable dwelling.
Do we have any other comments or questions in regards to this?
Question for either Eric or Allison. The comments that were received and your responses to them, Eric, will they be sent out to the originators, or is this just here for public record?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Weir. So, you know, we don't provide direct responses to each submission. So what happens is we get them, we provide them to the applicant, we provide them to council for consideration, and then anyone who wants a notice of the decision of council can receive one. So we need a written, we've had a couple of requests. So anyone who does put in a request, they'll get a notice of decision. Thank you.
And I know every one of these is taken on its own merit and its own decision making, and up in Barrett Chute where this property is, the topographic of it is sloping down, and so I think we need to take that into consideration too. And I think we also need to take into consideration that there are homes within the Barrett Chute area currently that had built their original dwelling and then have oversized secondary dwellings with living arrangements already on them. I think this is just the semantics of what order is this one going to be done. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I would say that's accurate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Would you like me to read the motion again?
I would love you to read the motion again, please. Thank you.
That council approved bylaw 06/2023 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 22/2003 as amended to rezone the subject lands located in part of lot 14, concession 3 being lot 22, plan 49M86, geographic township of Blythefield, from rural residential to rural residential exception 19 to permit an increase in size and height of a proposed secondary dwelling unit.
Is there a motion? Anybody make a motion on that? Councillor Tripp, secondary. Councillor Thompson. All in favor? Okay, all opposed? It's 4-1. Motion is carried.
Item 8.01.7, bylaw 07-2023, Calabogie Peaks, Juniper Ridge, ZB 2206.8 and ZB 2209 zoning bylaw amendments. The council, do you want me to read,
Yes,
or would you like to
I'm
discuss?
just wondering how long it's going to be again. No, I'm joking. Go ahead, please.
The council approved bylaw 07-2023, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 22/2003 to rezone the subject lands described as part of lot 19, concession 2, geographic township of Blythefield, to reflect the proposed rural residential development from rural residential exception 11, rural residential exception 11 holding, rural residential exception 18, tourist commercial exception 6, and tourist commercial exception 8 to rural residential exception 11, tourist commercial exception 6, tourist commercial exception 8, both tourist commercial zones align to meet the edge of the new boundary RRE1 zone boundary.
Thank you. Eric, would you like to speak to that, please?
Yes, and thank you, Mayor Weir. So this is just a return of a previous matter held in December, and there was a couple questions from council that we looked into further, just in regards to two matters. So there was a question about the potential of a fish sanctuary, and there was a question of in regards to traffic impact. I guess just in response to, or just to kind of preface before I kind of get into those, I'll just note a couple of things. So I guess firstly that this is not establishing the principle of development, if you will. So this Calabogie Peaks has it's actually the first exception special policy area in the county official plan in the rural designation, and for a very long time it's been recognized that this is a site that will experience significant development over time. So, and just specifically, the rural exception 1 designation establishes the peaks as an area for development of up to 418 residential units and up to 5,200 square meters of commercial area. It specifically identifies Juniper Ridge as an area for development of residential uses, including predominantly townhouse, semi-detached, and single-detached dwellings. I'll just note that this doesn't preclude the development of the condominium that's being proposed. So I guess all that to say that you know, in addition to the official plan designation, the lands are already designated rural residential exception 11 and rural residential exception 11 holding. The rural residential exception 11 zoning was put in place through bylaw 33-2008, so it goes back quite a ways. It permits single detached, semi-detached, duplex, triplex, row house, townhouse, and apartment dwellings, as well as a hotel condominium. So, and it actually incorporates a larger, physically a larger area than what is being proposed in this realigned boundary. So all that to say that the development of this area has been in play for a very long time. This isn't new. This isn't something the township hasn't been aware of or hasn't had the opportunity to consider. This has been coming for some time. So in relation to the fish sanctuary question, we have had a number of experts weigh in on it. We've looked at the policy implications in relation to fish sanctuary. And what we can say is that with respect to Planning Act applications, we're required to evaluate impacts on significant natural heritage features as described in the provincial policy statement. And these features, they're typically mapped on GIS layers that we have access to as staff. Some of them are provided and available publicly. There are some, and those would be like non-protected data layers. They're less vulnerable to damage or threat, illegal use and harvesting and whatnot. There are some significant features that are shown on Schedule B map for the county Renfrew official plan, including significant wetlands, woodlands, and valley lands. The county, one of the roles of the county is to be the one window for the province for us in terms of their policy and interpreting the policy. They did indicate that there is, and they did confirm that there's no significant natural heritage features that have been identified on or within 120 meters of the development area. And again, the 120 meters is kind of the rule of thumb in policy in terms of the influence area where you got to take a look at it. Fish spawning areas in particular, they're identified in the municipal plan review layers in small areas of Calabogie Lake and its tributaries, and none of them are located anywhere close to the nearest shore of Calabogie Lake. The nearest one's about 2 kilometers away. So, and those are what we would look at in terms of spawning areas. We've also confirmed with the Ministry of Northern Development, it's a long name now, Ministry of Northern Development, Mines and Natural Resources and Forestry, that the fish sanctuary node that's been identified, it's a fisheries management tool, and the intent is to limit sport fishing activities in the west half of Calabogie Lake to alleviate pressure on spawning sport fish populations and specifically the walleye population. It in itself is not a significant natural heritage feature under the provincial policy statement. It may contain spawning areas, and I've identified their location, and they're nowhere near this area. And so they're not something that we give regard to or required to give regard to in regards to our decisions on Planning Act matters. And I'll note that attached as Appendix C to the staff report, the applicant did provide a consultant letter essentially echoing those comments and substantiating those comments. In regards to traffic impact, so the question of traffic impact was raised in regards to development. Again, we're noting that the lands, this isn't, if we had a vacant piece of land and we were, it was designated just rural and, farm, and all of a sudden someone wants to come in and put 400 plus units on it, of course, we would be requesting that, we look at impacts to our infrastructure, our traffic infrastructure. I think what's very important to note here that these lands, the principle of this development is already established, and it would not be appropriate to reevaluate whether that's appropriate for these lands. The principle of development's already been established here. As noted, the subject lands, they're already zoned for it. The boundaries here, what we're doing is we're just reconfiguring them. We're actually significantly reducing them on the southern portion of Mary Joanne Drive. They're being reverted to the tourist commercial exception zone until the configuration of future developments confirmed. That all being said, we have consulted a traffic engineer on this to look at whether any warrants are met. And so what we're told is that, first of all, it's very unlikely that a development of this magnitude, and the engineer that we were in contact with is very familiar with the intersection in the area. They're very experienced, and just kind of on the face of it, they're not anticipating really that warrants are going to be met with regard to existing background and full build out of this development. All that being said, what his indication is that the only way to really know for sure is if we do some traffic counts. We've got the Black Cat traffic counter, so we can do some traffic counts at the intersection. The only real intersection that we're looking at here is Barrett Chute and Calabogie, and the only movement that's of any significance is the westbound left turn, and the only improvement that could be required is a dedicated left turn lane to accommodate stacking. What he's indicated is that in the peak hour, your maximum trips full build out on a development like this would be in the neighborhood of about 100 trips in peak hours, so that's less than 2 a minute. So they're not worried. They don't think warrants are going to be met just on at a high level, but we can certainly do some traffic counts and look at it. In terms of financing, that's really what development charges are there for. This development will be required to pay development charges, and that goes towards improvements to off-site infrastructure like traffic improvements. So we can certainly look at that, and I'm not gonna steal any Renee's thunder if she wants to speak to any of it, but it might be something if we want to look at reopening the DC study to include it as part of the 10-year capital forecast. If warrants are met and we want to look at improving that intersection. So that's something that we can do. There were a few other matters. Won't get too far into the weeds here, but they're all kind of referenced in the staff report. The peat bed subsurface disposal system, it is designed, it's it's well within its approved ECA capacity in order to accommodate this development. They are looking to go through and have some re-rating done to even increase the capacity without the need to add to the number of cells that are proposed here, so up to 3. At the end of the day, what the engineers are saying is that the system works so well that it can accommodate more than we thought it could. So they're going through that process. But there are no concerns with respect to impacts in relation to water quality. The whole way these systems work is that the effluent, it doesn't discharge into a stream or anything like that. I'm not sure people really understand how these are designed. This functions very much like a septic system in the sense that the effluent goes into the soil and then it discharges into the groundwater. And there is regular testing that happens. There are monitoring wells upstream and downstream of the beds. And what they're finding is that there's actually no difference in water quality. So the beds are working really well. So we're not anticipating that there's going to be any impact in relation to water quality or anything like that. They are required to submit annual monitoring reports to the ministry. Everything is very heavily regulated in relation to the system because of its capacity and because of the number of residents that it serves. So with all that said, I think we're returning to our recommendation that this zoning bylaw amendment be approved, and we can continue to move forward with site plan approval and getting the applicant moving forward with this development. So if there are any other questions, I'd certainly be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Are there any questions, concerns?
Just a point of clarification, Eric, for this amendment, I believe the concern was around the entire development, not just the phase 1. And that's where the future of the sewage question came in. I think it was well presented that the current system would be good capacity for phase 1, and beyond that, then it would start to look into the other system. And I think that's where the concern was raised, as well as the traffic stuff. And as you pointed out, you can look at the traffic study from the development perspective, but if we add that to the existing traffic that occurs primarily on the weekends because of recreation, now it's larger than it was before. But as you pointed out, that could be looked at in the future as a separate thing. So I just want to clarify that, because there was the point of the first phase, and I think that's very well contained. It was really about the holistic piece of the development, where people had concerns.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns? Okay, shall we move to?
Would you like me to read the motion again?
Is everybody clear on the motion? I'm getting the thumbs up from Councillor Tripp. So I'm taking that as no, you get to save your breath for a bit. So on the bylaw 072023, do we have a mover? Councillor Tripp, second. Councillor Thompson, all in favor? Unanimous? Motion passed. Thank you.
8.01.8, Council Resolution to County Council regarding Official Plan Amendment Number 37. The Council provide by resolution comments to the County of Renfrew on the County Official Plan Amendment Number 37, Calabogie Motorsports, being an application to amend the County Official Plan submitted by JP2G Consultants, Inc. on behalf of Track Corp Canada, Inc. to reinstate the uses permitted in the base rural designation.
Eric, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Weir. Yeah, this is actually an application to the County of Renfrew. So I just want to be clear, and I think in the town of Renfrew we process them. So I need to clarify for myself occasionally that this is not a township an application that Township Council will be approving. This will go to County Council for approval. They will consider our comments in the same vein as other comments are considered in relation to applicable policy and legislation. They'll also, of course, consider any technical comments that we have, if there are issues with not necessarily this application, but on others, if there are issues with, road access or lot grading and drainage or anything, they would consider those comments on a technical basis, and we would provide those at the staff level as well. What we've done here is, again, public meeting last Thursday. The county staff prepared a detailed report on this matter. Mine got to be a little bit shorter, which is nice. But essentially, this is looking, again, at reintroducing the rural exception 5 permitted uses. And again, I think it was noted at the public meeting, I'll note it again, these are uses that are permitted in definitely the vast majority of the county. They are the base, it's the base land use unless you have a more specific land use that you are going to apply. And And again, I think as was noted, and I'll reinforce, this is step one, like really step one in any future development. I think, as was indicated at the public meeting, the goal here is to do some limited rural residential development kind of along Wilson Farm Road. That'll be targeted, geared towards the motorist enthusiasts, folks that like fast cars, the big garages, that kind of thing. And so as part of that, because of the proximity of the track, they will have to do some noise study. They have to be treated in the same way that, residential impacts to other residential uses, are evaluated. They're aware of that. They will be, providing a noise study in support of any future development. And so there are policy requirements in relation to development with respect to the tract property that I think, the county is satisfied that, there are sufficient development controls, checks and balances kind of as we go through. And I think that's the submission of the applicant in this regard. And I think we would agree with that. Any residential uses are going to require some form of land division. We can enter into agreements. We can require supporting studies. It will trigger policies. Any non-residential development of any significance is we're going to require site plan approval. Again, we would require supporting materials studies, drawings, designs, impact evaluations, that kind of thing. So I think this is kind of step one, and we'll kind of move through the policies as we kind of go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns on the resolution?
Sorry, if I may, just Mayor Weir. So the process here is that the county wants to see any comments from council through a resolution. We would forward that resolution to the county for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Seeing none. No. Move that, anybody to move the resolution for the county council regarding the plan, official plan 37? Mr. Thompson, secondary? Mr. Popke, all in favor? Unanimous, so carried.
8.01.9, bylaw 08-2023, appoint a committee of adjustment. That council adopt bylaw 08-2023, being a bylaw to appoint a committee of adjustment for the corporation of the Township of Greater Madawaska.
I believe this is back to you, Eric. You got the spotlight tonight.
We're only on 9. All right. This is essentially the same report, again, for council consideration on the committee of adjustment in terms of its composition. And council's required to pass a bylaw identifying the composition of the committee. Council can, the composition of the committee can be members of council, can be members of the public, a combination thereof. There are pros and cons to either approach, but kind of as a baseline, in the town of Renfrew, the town of Renfrew has moved to 4 standing committees, and the Economic Development, Planning and Tourism Committee is disposing of what were committee of adjustment, consent and minor variance applications. Just as a matter of, the volume of those applications, we didn't feel were such that, warranted an additional committee. There were, some economies of scale that we could take advantage of with dealing with a number of other matters, kind of on the same agenda. And council felt that was the most appropriate avenue. In that case, there are 3 members of council that sit on that committee. So that's the approach that the town of Renfrew has taken. Just kind of as a baseline, subject to any comments or direction from council, this bylaw that's being attached has the members of council noted as being appointed to the committee. If council would like to change that bylaw or have staff to come back with a different composition, we can certainly make those changes. I would just note that there are some applications that we do need to dispose of. So if we don't come to a decision on this point this evening, we will be bringing some minor variances to council next month, just because we technically have 30 days to deal with them, and they've been kind of sitting just because of the election and whatnot. So we will bring them to council. Council is able to dispose of them. But yeah, so we have this bylaw before council, and if there are any questions, certainly be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Any questions, concerns?
What is the general, how many can we expect? When we say we don't think we'll have very many, so we can handle it in our regular meetings, I want to know.
I believe in 2022, there were 10 to 12, and I'm looking. But we're usually around within that area.
I have 16.
Oh, 16. So I was off.
They're minor variances. Are they generally very time-consuming?
Through you, Mayor Weir. No, the disposal of minor variance applications, it's a little bit different. They're required to meet 4 tests. The standard, the reports are a lot shorter. And I think the deliberations are typically quite a bit shorter. I'd say they take quite a bit less time than, say, a zoning bylaw amendment application.
Any other questions or comments at this time before I make one? Okay. I think when we're looking at this, with the Ontario Land Tribunal's way that they can now effectively find, and sometimes quite substantial if necessary, can find the decisions, I think it'd be pertinent that we as council, who are 5 elected officials of the township, who people put their trust in, I think that we need to create the committee of adjustment with the 5 of us at this time. And I think part of this process too, I think in a year, we review our positions and how the committee of adjustment is handling the issues, and whether it's functioning appropriately and for the best interest of the township. As I say, we have new timelines, new deadlines, and the possibility of fines. I think it's incumbent upon us to work on behalf of the community as a committee of adjustment. And the fact that we could do a review at the end of the year or yearly of our position and how it is progressing and whether we need to make any other changes. Thank you. Any supplementals?
I would like to say that this is not showing any distrust in the previous groups. They're well-trained. They knew what they're doing. I think more than anything, it's the fact that we're all new as councillors. And when we have our meetings, we really need to get a handle on how this process works as councillors. So that's one reason I'd like to do that. Plus, we'll have Eric at these meetings. So, and there's so many changes with the Building More Houses All the Time Act, whatever they call them, that I think we really do need to be careful with even the minor variances. So I just wanted to mention that, say that.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing up the past committees. They were doing a stellar job, and it's not to take away from them by any means. I think we just need to get a handle on it, be fiscally responsible in our decisions as well. And I also know that there are a lot of great people that were on the Committee of Adjustments that we could certainly use their help and leverage on the other committees that we'll be going forward with. Their expertise and their time on committees would be gratefully useful for that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Tripp.
Thank you. So I agree with the comments and especially your comment about and the logic behind us stepping in with a review at the end of the year. I feel down the road, there's a benefit just in terms of transparency and engagement of the community to have community voice at this committee. But that said, I think it's very important that the 5 of us are on it for the reasons you've raised. But I do think there's a window and an opportunity to have a representation from the community on it once we've gone through a year and we've seen the lay of the land. And maybe that's part of our consideration at the review. And then secondly, I think perhaps some kind of formal acknowledgement or thanks would be beneficial to those who are on the committee that are stepping down or who have served us so well over the past year. That something come either from staff or from you, Mayor, just recognizing their contribution to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
So question, given the bylaw outlines several options, just wondered how we're going to work through that.
And the, excuse me, the bylaw itself that is, 082023, is that as written here? Oh, okay.
Microphone?
About various options for the structure of the committee. So there are options, yeah, 100% council, council member and members of the public and any combination thereof. So just curious how we're going to handle that.
Sorry, I'm not quite clear on.
Yeah.
Do you mean this evening?
What are we voting on right now?
So what you're voting on is bylaw 08-2023 is the bylaw which is attached to the report.
Okay, so can you?
Which is a bylaw to appoint Rob Weir, Jeff Levesque, Rob Tripp, Taylor Popke, and Lois Thompson shall be hereby appointed to the Committee of Adjustment, is the first item within the numbered item within the bylaw.
Any other questions, concerns? Do you want to read the?
So I would suggest that we make a slight adjustment to the motion that is before council, that council adopt bylaw 08-2023 being a bylaw to appoint a committee of adjustment for the corporation of the Township of Greater Madawaska, and furthermore that council requests this matter be brought back for reconsideration in January 2024.
Agree? Yep. Motion? Yep. Secondary? Councilor Tripp? All in favor? All opposed? 3-2. Motion carried.
8.01.10, use of unopened road allowance for recreational purposes, cross-country skiing, and this is regarding the presentation that was made earlier this evening. The council resolved to permit the use of the unopened road allowance in the vicinity of Kennelly Mountain Road and Flat Road, more particularly between concessions 7 and 8 from lots 11 to 13, between lots 10 and 11, concession 7, and between concessions 15 and 16 at lots 13 and 15, geographic township of Brome for the passive recreation purposes, more particularly for the establishing of trails for cross-country skiing, including the removal of dead, dying, dangerous, or obstructive trees and other vegetation by Leslie Cassidy and Peter Shute, or by persons as may assist them from time to time, subject to the acknowledgement that such establishment maintenance and use is at the user's own risk and expense, and the township does not warrant the suitability for any unopened road allowance for such purposes.
Any questions or comments? None seen. Somebody to move this? Councillor Thompson, secondary. Councillor Popke. All in favor? Unanimous. Motion carried.
And we are done with Eric.
I spent a lot of time on that. No questions?
So 9.01.1, bylaw 02/2023, temporary borrowing. The council approved bylaw 02-2023, being a bylaw to temporarily borrow monies until taxes and other revenues are received up to $1 million. And furthermore, council direct the mayor and CAO/deputy treasurer to sign the agreement.
Renee, may I ask?
Yes, so this is a normal bylaw. We present to council every year at the beginning of the year. The intent of it is to have funds available should we, as we're paying off payments going from 2022 or whatnot, we'd have funds available if required as we collect taxes, which is the due date is March 31st. We haven't needed to use the $1 million available. However, this is in place just in the event that that would ever happen.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns? None seen. You have somebody to move this motion? Councillor Tripp, secondary. Councillor Popke. All in favor? All opposed? Anyone opposed? No, none seen. Unanimous.
9.01.2, bylaw 03/2023, interim tax levy. The council approved bylaw 03/2023, being a bylaw to provide for an interim tax levy on all properties and to provide for payment of taxes and penalty and interest of 1.25%.
Renee?
Again, this is a bylaw well, this one, as per the municipal act, we're required to pass to be able to collect for the interim tax levy. This bylaw allows us to collect 50% of last year's, so it's the total of 2022 at 50%. We process the billing in February, and then just for your information, how we proceed normally is once budgets pass, we set the tax rate. We then wait for the county in May to pass their ratios, and then we're able to set the final billing going into August. So if this is simply just to approve the 50% of the prior year.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns? None? If somebody move this bylaw? Councillor Popke, secondary. Councillor Thompson. All in favor? All in favor, unanimous, motion carried.
9.01.3, 2023, candidate committee members. The council approved the appointment of the following members of the public to the 2023 candidate committee. Jean Libby, Jane Weir, Lucy Perrier, Leslie Cassidy, Jolene, I apologize, Meloche. And furthermore, council appoint Councillor Rob Tripp as council representative on the committee.
I'd just like to make it clear that one of the names on that list is my wife, Jane Weir. However, there's no pecuniary interest in this other than setting up a parade and making it good for everybody in the community. But I just wanted to make note that my wife's name is it.
Okay. I'd like to make a comment that we've got two people from Ward 3 on the candidate committee for the first time. It has been traditionally sort of a Calabogie thing with funds going to the other wards to do their own thing. But I thought it was a good idea to have it more. I mean, we should be able to, maybe share resources. If we get an act in, maybe they can work 2 days or whatever. So anyhow, I think that's encouraging.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments or concerns? Do we have somebody to move this bylaw forward? Councillor Levesque, secondary, Councillor Thompson. All in favor? It's unanimous. Motion carried.
So 9.01.4, Renfrew Area Chamber of Commerce Council Representative.
I have asked Councillor Jeff Levesque if he would take this responsibility on for us, and he has agreed to, and I think he'd be a fabulous representative for us at the Chamber of Commerce.
That council appoints Jeff Levesque to serve as the Township Council Representative on the Renfrew and Area Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors.
Questions, comments? Oh, okay.
Jump to the movie.
Okay, we have a mover, Lois. Secondary. And all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, motion carried. Thank you, Jeff.
9.01.5, committee survey. That council approves the committee survey as presented. So at the last council meeting, staff was requested to create a committee survey that would be distributed to determine what the public are interested in participating in the various committees. It is instead of proceeding with creating a number of committees that there's not a whole lot of interest. So attached to the agenda is a draft document. I have worked with Councillor Tripp on this endeavor. He has been on committees before and within the township, and he had a lot of good ideas and input. So this is the draft. If council does approve, the intention is that it would become live tomorrow, that people could start completing, and then we would advertise, put in our local businesses, and have a closing on February 8th so that it could come back to council in February along with terms of references for various committees.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns? Councillor Tripp, was your hand up or just fixing your camera?
It is, but I'll defer to Councillor Levesque to go first.
Okay. Thanks, Levesque.
Just a question about how the decision of the council or the committees are going to be done.
So that will be, so a recommendation will come back forward to council with information from the survey, with options and recommendations on how to proceed.
Councillor Tripp.
I noticed the absence of, and this may be cognitive on my part, but the planning committee, did we agree to take that off planning and development? And it's a discussion that we had back and forth as we were kind of fine tuning this list to go out. And really our intent here is to engage the community and our ratepayers and identifying those committees that they feel are important, ranking them. So to Councillor Levesque's point, we'll have data to make informed decisions on which ones are good. But I'm not sure if we need one on planning, and it's just for discussion. I'm open either way. And it may come up when the public responds. The final question is, are there areas here that we've left out? But planning was something that was really centric during the campaign, and smart growth and so on and so forth. I don't know if we've captured it here, or Allison, if it's just I know our last conversation, there was a lot of changes back and forth, and I may have dropped it at my end. So,
so it is touched on to a degree under the economic development and communication. But if council does wish to have one specific for solely planning, that we can, this document can be amended and added as part of the survey.
Just supplemental, if I may, through you, Mayor Weir, is on economic and development and communications. That's really our driving committee to attract business and bring people into the community and enhance kind of our corporate growth, corporate strength. And the skill set for that committee is somewhat different than we'd see on a planning committee. Planning is really about smart growth, tying into our upcoming strategic plan. Where do we want to go? Maybe it's a conversation when this comes back from the community, and we'll see what kind of feedback we get from them with the survey. But it's an area I think we should, at least maybe at council, have a discussion around, do we need those two as separate, or should they be kind of grouped into one, economic development and planning? Should it be a planning committee and then one specifically on economic growth? Not sure if it's for discussion tonight or when we get back feedback from the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tripp. Question to our CAO. What would the timeline be if we made the decision to have a planning put in within this document?
It could be done relatively easily, because we did discuss it, and this is a few iterations, as you may expect. So I think it could be done with relatively ease and still meet our timelines of having it out tomorrow. Okay. And back to council on the 8th.
Would council be agreeable to having the planning put in? Because ultimately we are getting the feedback from the community on what they believe are the importance. And I don't see how adding an extra option for them would be detrimental to this, because they're able to go through this process and rank them as well as priorities. So it would give us, we would understand what our community wants us to proceed with. So if there's any objections to that, I don't see why we shouldn't add it on if Councillor Tripp believes it should be there.
So I can amend the motion to read that the council.
Councillor Tripp?
Oh, sorry, no, I was just going to make an acknowledgement to the work that Allison did on this. This was, the heavy lifting of this was carried while she was on holiday. So just wanted to acknowledge my appreciation for her work in the number of kind of drafts back and forth in our discussions. Much appreciated. I think what you've turned out here is a really good document. So thank you.
Thank you.
One quick question. In terms of collecting the survey and the results, so the ones that are proposed are ranked. The ones in the box are just suggestions of others, so they won't be ranked by default. I'm just curious, like how, like as an example, we're not primarily, but we are a big part of tourism, and tourism is not mentioned there at all. If somebody comes up with that, you know, we'll need to figure out how to add that if there's enough call for it, if you will. Absolutely. So that will be, so I think that's why the last item number 17 on the survey is so crucial, is it allows for that. And then if that is a large one, then that would be part of the recommendation coming forward to council, is that, you know, we've had a number of people stress tourism, or there's been some interest, is could tourism be added to another committee because it has had additional interest.
Mr. Thompson?
I just want to make some suggestions for the wording. One is the Heritage Advisory Committee. If we could add Indigenous, so for rural and Indigenous traditions and values, so it doesn't sound just like pioneer. You know, things like Eagles Nest Trail is an Indigenous heritage thing that should be honored, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
There was another. I find Operations Committee is way too broad, and I know you said there's room for other ideas, but we heard about environment and sustainability on the campaign trail. Do we think that should be a separate one, or just leave it for other?
So environment, that falls under the operations, is our waste sites and our transfer stations. It's separate, it's not the general environment, it's not our lakes and our rivers and our, so we can, like, we can add as many as we want, but it was just how long do we want to make this survey? So again, we can add.
Oh, sorry, I just think if there is an overwhelming interest in that it will be put within the comments as well. And this, what we see in front of us here is, let's just take Recreation Advisory Committee, supporting logistics operations for recreational activities throughout the township. That's just an overview, a holistic idea of what that will be. The actual mandate will be created once the committees are going to be going forward. So I think if we need to put something within a mandate to address something within a committee, we can do that. That's my interpretation of it anyways.
If I may, Mayor Weir, you're correct in that. When we first did the draft, we had a number of committees. We had too many committees and too many choices. This is really a snapshot of the high level interest from the community and where they would like us to go. We mirrored this as much as we could off of past committees, but really wanted to have the community to have an access or an opportunity to be part of this decision-making process going forward, because these are the committees we'll have for the next 4 years that reflect, I think, where the community wants to be. So we cut some out, hoping that they will get picked up by the members in that last question. SurveyMonkey, the instrument that's managing this, is a very powerful tool for kind of collecting the binary data. We're into the weeds now, but it can lift up, you know, the key words in terms of how many responses on environmental did we get? How many on heritage do we get? So I think that last question will help shape or fine tune. And then as Mayor Weir said, you know, this is really, you know, behind this will come the terms of reference, the full descriptions of the committee, the application process for the committee, so that members can be really informed in terms of what we're asking them to sign up for. But we wanted to keep this high level, not to get them too bogged down in the weeds. Very quick. Tell us on a scale of 1 to 5, you know, is economic development and communication something you see as a priority in our community? And then the mathematical analysis afterwards is quite simple. And then we've asked them at the end to rank in their order of preference. So not only tell us which ones are important, but out of the ones we're presenting, which ones do you think are the most important? And then finally, at the end, what have we forgot? Are there areas that you really think we want to go? So high level, just to get the data in, and then we can start making some decisions once this is wrapped up and responses in. Thank you.
Thank you. I think just one other question for myself is just for the people that are watching and the record, how will people be able to vote?
So there will be a promotion, and there will be links available through our Facebook page and our website. There's going to be paper copies also available and notifications in our businesses for those who do not have a computer or access to a computer. We're reaching out to our service groups to distribute it through those agencies or groups to their members. And if nothing else, they can call the township and we will make arrangements so that everyone's able to complete a survey.
Thank you.
And just one minor point, number 8, economic development. It looks like the ranking item doesn't align with it. It says Community Development Advisory Committee.
Number 8.
So if you look at number 8 and then go down to number 12, it's
Yeah.
underneath youth. So I know this isn't
Yeah.
the survey, but.
Yeah. So I've amended the motion to read that council approves the survey committee as amended to include in the survey a planning committee and make administrative changes as needed.
Do we need to include the changes? Is that administrative?
So that would be administrative. It's not, we're not changing the intent. It's just elaborating on the title, making sure that the titles up in one section match the titles below. That's all administrative.
Any other further questions, comments, or concerns? Do we have a motion to move this? Mover? Councilor Beck, second. Councilor Thompson. All in favor? Unanimous? Motion carried. Thank you.
9.01.6 Griffith Mile Committee Terms of Reference. The council approves the Griffith Mile Committee Terms of Reference as presented. So at the last meeting, there was discussion and an update on the Griffith Mile. There was a public meeting, and there was a report provided to council as a result of the public meeting and some history on the file. One of the suggestions at the public meeting was to form a committee to champion and look for ways to see if there's alternative ways to improve the safety, which could be signage, any number of things, and also continue to campaign the levels of government to see if something can be done with regard to speed and or passing lanes.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Popke?
I'd just like to say that speed is one of those things that, what do you call it? We're all different comfort levels, and it's one of those things that we shouldn't. Some of us are comfortable driving faster than others in a safe manner, and I just believe that doesn't matter how many signs you put out. Certain people, it's not going to affect speeding. You can drop the speed limit to 40, and people are still going to speed through there. It's just one of those things that some people are more comfortable than others.
Thank you. Any other further comments, questions, or concerns? I'm going to. I was going to say something else first, though. I think to address what you were saying about the speed and people they will be speeding, I think that's part of what the committee has to work on with enforcement and so on and things like that. So I mean, totally agree with you that people that will speed no matter what, but it'll be to the committee to work with the government and the OPP on how to address that issue. So I think you're bang on, but I think that's what the committee is going to be about, is how do we address it? How do we get out through these things? Do we have somebody to move this? Councillor Thompson, secondary. Councillor Tripp. All in favor? All opposed? 4-4, 1 against. Motion carried.
Uh, 10.01.1 appointment to the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority. The council appoints Taylor Propke to represent the Township of Greater Madawaska on the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority until 2026. I know this was already discussed, but we had to actually pass a formal motion.
Any questions or concerns? None seen. Do we have somebody to move on this motion? Councillor Levesque. Councillor Tripp. All in favor? Unanimous? Motion carried. Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is the closed session. However, we are at 5:40. So after 6 o'clock, we are to pass a motion to extend. So I would propose that that motion be passed now to allow us to go past 6 o'clock.
Do we have somebody to?
I have to read the motion.
Oh, you have to read it.
Yeah, and I can't look at it. Be it resolved that the Township of Greater Madawaska Council proceeds beyond the hour of 6 p.m. at the January 19th, 2023 regular council meeting as per section 13.13 of bylaw 74, 2022 being the procedural bylaw.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Levesque, secondary Councillor Popke. All in favor? Opposed?
So then we cannot go past 6 o'clock because it shall be a majority of vote.
Shall be a majority of votes.
It shall be a majority of vote for those present. Okay. Oh, and a unanimous vote, sorry, for thereafter. So we can't go past 7. Yes.
Okay, motion carried for now.
Okay. That the council of January 19th, 2023 at 5:38 PM enter into a closed section pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. A, Causeway, B, Smithson Lane, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. A, fire services, B, CAO, and finally, the purpose of educating or training members, the purpose of educating or training the members' processes.
Do we have somebody to move us into close? Councilor Levesque, second Councilor Tripp. All in favor to move into a closed session? Unanimous? Thank you.
12.01.1, move to open. That the council meeting of January 19th, 2023 move back into open session at 6:20 PM.
Mover? Councilor Thompson, second. Councilor Popke, all in favor? Unanimous, motion.
That council instructs the following as a result of the closed meeting item, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting municipality or local boards. A, Causeway; B, Smithson Lane; personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, fire services. The purpose of educating or training the members' processes. And it is move as directed and closed.
Councilor Thompson, Councilor Popke, all in favor? Unanimous?
And we are at the bylaws. That be it resolved that the following bylaws: 02/2023 temporary boring, 2023 temporary boring, 03/2023 interim tax levy, 04/2023 zoning bylaw amendment ZB 2206.10, 05/2023 zoning bylaw amendment ZB 2206.11, 06/2023 zoning bylaw amendment ZB 2206.12, 07/2023 zoning bylaw amendments ZB 2206.8 and ZB 2206.9, 08/2023 appoint a committee of adjustment be deemed read a second and final time and passed by council, and furthermore that 09/2023 confirmatory be deemed read a first, second, and final time and passed by council at the regular council meeting held January 19th, 2023.
Mover? Councilor Thompson, Councilor Tripp, all in favor? Unanimous?
That the regular council meeting of January 19th, 2023 be adjourned at 6:23 PM.
No, I'm taking my time. Motion? Second? Councilor Popke, all in favor?
Sorry,
Thank
Lois.
you. Motion to adjourn has passed. Please don't get in Councilor Thompson's way.